I read another Max Brooks book. Let's talk about Bigfoot. Bigfoot isn't something I've avoided because I'm scared like I have for zombies, but it's still not something I'm interested in. Ghosts, goblins, Mothman, Bigfoot, I just don't think about them.
I don't believe in horoscopes. I don't believe in Christmas.
But I read Devolution and I loved it. Devolution follows similar framing as World War Z. Max Brooks has been tasked with figuring out what happened to the community of Greenloop. Half of the story is written as interviews from professionals and family members of the victims, and the other half is the diary of Kate, a woman who had just moved to Greenloop. The book is very fast-paced. Kate and her husband move into their new home, meet the neighbors, then the inciting incident, Mount Rainier erupts, and less than 2 weeks later, the story is all wrapped up.
The end.
So basically, Mount Rainier erupts, and the lava flows trap the 12 citizens of Greenloop, this little eco-community, and leaves them without internet or phone.
No service!
It also displaces a lot of hungry animals, and that's what leads to conflict. One big conflict is if Greenloop will be found and saved before their food runs out. That's this major subplot, and it's what introduces Kate to Mostar, who helps them survive their dwindling food supply and the animals. The animals are the other conflict, specifically the hungry and dangerous Bigfoot family. Not one, about a dozen Bigfoot in total. I don't know if I'm pluralizing Bigfoot right. I'm gonna stick with Bigfoot. No one ever talks about a whole pack of them.
It's a Bigfoot person!
And basically the next day after the eruption, Kate sees the first Bigfoot. And this is where a big breath of fresh air comes from. She sees the Bigfoot, and there's the initial horror trope of denial and not knowing what she's seeing. But Kate's husband and Mostar don't discount Kate. They don't call her crazy, and that's a common horror trope. The authorities or family or whoever deny what the protagonist is seeing and don't take them seriously. And the rest of the Greenloop community lives in denial longer. But it was nice not having Dan, who is Kate's shitty husband.
It's all my fault. I've been a bad husband.
Gaslight Kate about what she saw. Then over the course of 3 days, everyone comes to accept that Bigfoot is real and is their problem. The Bigfoot comes down into their little community and goes through their trash. They get videos of it. Then the next day, one of their neighbors goes for help. And that night, they hear him being torn apart by Bigfoot.
Oh, I'm hurt!
And that leads to a nice subversion. It's not that no one accepts that the monsters exist. It's that they refuse to accept how dangerous they are. There's actually a scene in the book before the Bigfoots become a problem when a mountain lion comes into their community and tries to attack the one child, Palomino. And when Mostar stabs the mountain lion, Palomino's moms and the other neighbors get upset that Mostar hurt the cat.
Bad cat! Bad cat!
And I actually want to do a big segue here because there's another scene where they think the mountain lion is fighting a bear. And as someone who grew up in the mountains of Colorado, everything about how the characters treated the mountain lion infuriated me. It was brilliant writing. It was just reading stupid people being stupid.
All people are stupid.
So in America, there are no grizzly bears. There have not been grizzly bears in the continental United States in decades. If you ever see a bear, unless it's in a zoo, it is a brown or black bear. They're not that big by bear standards, and they're easily frightened. If they see you, just make yourself big and slowly back away.
I'm big enough.
There's a fair chance you'll scare them off. Mountain lions are a very different story. I heard growing up that a mountain lion will see you many times before you see it. And that's why mountain lions aren't interested in humans. We don't taste good, and we're not easy prey for them. Make yourself loud if you ever think one's nearby, and they'll probably leave you alone. The only real risk either of these animals ever really pose to a human is if you get between them and their babies. Mountain lions and bears will almost never fight. They occupy the same area, but they eat very different prey. and honestly, a bear isn't much of a match for a mountain lion, and they know that. If you ever hear a bear and a mountain lion fighting, then chances are it's not hunger driving them like they theorized in the book. It's rabies, and that animal needs to be killed before it can infect others.
I'm sick.
And the hungry, healthy mountain lion in the book also should have been killed. It makes sense it would go after the little girl. That's what predators do. They go after the youngest and weakest of the herd. The mountain lion in the book wanted to kill and eat Palomino, and it was infuriating in the most entertaining way, having her moms unable to acknowledge that.
Think of the children!
That was actually a really fun psychological block so many characters had. They were in their own homes, and it wasn't until the danger was breaking down the door that they finally were able to accept that the danger was real and it was after them. And it was also fun having the other interviews breaking up all of this and having the characters in Green Loop say one thing to try and disprove the amount of danger they were in, only for the next interview to show how wrong they were.
You're wrong! You're wrong!
Another thing I really liked about this book was that it had a climax. Don't get me wrong, I love World War Z, but it doesn't have a climax, and it shouldn't have been made into a movie if it didn't. This could make a great movie. The Bigfoot comes, attacks them, and the climax is them all fighting back, and everyone except for Kate and Palomino dying.
Bring out your dead!
And then help comes, and Kate and Palomino are long gone. Normally I hate endings like that. I like my fairy tales where everyone survives and the Prince Charming comes and everything gets wrapped up in a little bow.
I do love a happy ending, don't you?
But this book's ending actually felt really satisfying. There's this one part of the climax where Palomino gets grabbed by a Bigfoot and one of her moms runs over and literally tears the Bigfoot's throat out. Then the Bigfoot bats her away before it dies and it kills Palomino's mom. And it's a really satisfying way for the character to go out. And so many of them get those same satisfying send-offs.
The end.
And yeah, it's another great book that I enjoyed. The only thing that really threw me was the pop culture references. I had never heard of Mostar until I read this book and looked up the city. And I'm glad I did, but that meant that some of Mostar's character and backstory were lost on me the first time around. Which was fine, because Kate had also not heard of Mostar. But I definitely read Mostar's character different after learning about the Siege of Mostar. I also was not familiar with Mount Rainier or Kate's pop culture references to Downton Abbey, which made some parts a little confusing, but didn't take away from the overall enjoyment of the story.
This is Downton Abbey.
But that can be a fine line to walk, when to and not to put pop culture references in your book. Especially now in the age of streaming, when the shows everyone is watching are few and far between, it's getting harder. That was the biggest writer's takeaway I got from the book. Be careful about references.
Stop it. Pop culture, pop culture.
What towns, events, or pop culture do you include in your story? And can you afford to make them relevant to your plot? If you do make them relevant to your plot, then you have to go into your book knowing you're probably not writing a timeless classic, because place names change and history gets forgotten. As soon as you add real-world references to your book, you are potentially aging it, and you have to decide if you're okay with that aging, or if the references can or has already stood the test of time.
Here's looking at you, Cud.
I've stayed away from pop culture references in my writing so far, just because it's not a beast I feel like I'm a good enough writer to tackle yet. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. I did not like Devolution less because Kate called one of the Bigfoots Granny Dowager. Did I get the reference? No. Would getting the reference have improved the reading for me? Maybe. Maybe there's some of Kate's characterization or something about the Bigfoot that was lost on me. It's all relative. And that's all I've really got to say about Devolution. It's a good book. Go read it. And don't mess with wild animals.